In My Hero Academia Chapter 422, Deku rises to the occasion as the greatest hero. Aoyama left an outstretched hand in Deku's direction. The two had been separated by the mayhem of the battlefield. Deku called out to his friend, but was swiftly told to just keep running by a smiling Aoyama. Eraserhead shifted his attention and began to yell out Shirakumo's name, but stopped himself. The shadowy figure seemed to say something as his composition failed. He wouldn't be able to help them close the distance. Aizawa looked at the current state of his childhood friend with vulnerable and pained eyes. Opening this many warp portals seems to have pushed the already unstable Nomu well beyond his limitations. Deku gritted his teeth as he charged forward. The battlefield was like something out of Attack on Titan. The Ketsubutsu Academy kids Yoshindo and Tatami Nakagame were helping out too. Snipe unloaded an entire clip in the villain's direction, while Manga and the other long-range heroes sent attacks of their own. All for One callously observed their resistance. Their attacks were ineffective against the hardened exterior of the Fiend. With Nagamasa and Vlad King near her, a frustrated Kami mentioned how, unlike All for One, their current enemy was resistant to her illusions. This is likely due to the combination of not only Ragdoll's search quirk, but also the fourth user's danger sense quirk. Eraserhead contacted his fellow heroes like Cementoss over their communicators. He told them all to open a path that would lead them to Shigaraki. The villain then announced his full factor release. This is the same destructive transformation that an infuriated All for One used against Bakugo, an abominable form that was now being wielded without emotions. The villain explained that he takes multiple powers and bends them to his will. So it wasn't like his enemies would win just because they have an army. A searing beam of light was shot in their direction, in addition to countless other projectiles. Invisible Girl leapt between the beam and the others and curved it elsewhere. Deku called out to her. With her face exposed, she let them know that dealing with light is her strong suit. Immediately after that, Momo completed her creation of a railgun. She called out to Kaminari, and he began charging the oversized weapon with his electricity. The electric attack was sent to the villain in tandem with his own redirected beam. Meanwhile, the hardened spikes of his mother, the oldest known quirk in existence, began littering the scene. This is becoming all too similar to the battlefield All for One left behind after killing One for All's third wielder and slaughtering his forces. The Demon King repelled the attacks while speaking of their insolence. Yet again, the scene was saturated by hellish attacks. Deku prepared a fist while beginning to tell the villain to stop hurting his friends. But this was interrupted by his friends fighting to protect him. Kaibara, Sato, Sero, Ibara, Shishida, Koda, and Ojiro all fended off the attacks in defense of Deku. Ojiro told his injured friend to conserve his strength for when it's needed the most. Sato grimaced while reminding Deku that he is the only one of them that can do any real damage to the guy, so he could leave the defense to them. Just then, Deku was grabbed by two elongated appendages. As they scaled the villain's tentacles, Tsu and Shoji lifted Deku off the ground. The many refugees anxiously watched the battle unfold. Tsu's little sister Satsuki called out to the rest of their family over her big sister's efforts. Tsu's younger brother Samidare joined Satsuki in cheering their sibling on. Joji's childhood friend, the one he'd saved, also cried for him to do his best. Joji admitted that they lacked the agility needed to avoid such destructive attacks, but at the very least, he and Tsu intended to send Deku as far as they could manage. Deku called out to them as he was sent forward. As he landed, one of All for One's elongated protrusions approached his location. This was pushed aside by the guts and spirit of Kirishima, Mina, and Fat Gum. Mina and Kirishima's friends from private school reacted to the moment. Red Riot urged Deku to do his best, and in turn, Mina promised that they would do the same. Deku lowered his head while regaining the momentum needed for a full sprint. Rushing forward, he thanked them all for their efforts. Meanwhile, the villain was perplexed. He wondered why these half-dead heroes wouldn't just die. They could barely move at this point, yet their eyes told a different story. It was unsettling to watch these pesky flies transform into resilient roaches. But suddenly, the Destroyer came to a realization. He remembered his invasion of One for All during the First War. Back then, he heckled Shimura and his brother Yoichi for putting their faith in such a worthless successor, a sentiment that was even shared by the second and third users back then. But now, the evil parasite realized the error of his perspective. Finally, He understood the danger posed by Izuku Midoriya. Deku continued his jaunt, and was even provided a bounce pad thanks to Gentle Criminal, or Gentle Hero I suppose, who told him to do his best. Death Arm saw the young hero and told him the same thing, which is what he is now doing despite his retirement, as Deku and the others inspired him. The villain could properly see that Deku's weakness is something that All Might himself lacked. Tokoyami is not currently part of this final battle, and is still with a quirkless Hawks, but he too wished for Deku to do his best. Deku began to stumble, but just then his arm was lifted. Ida helped bring him the burst of speed he so desperately needed. It's the strength that comes from his weakness that makes everyone around him rise to the occasion time and time again. Deku has never been an invincible powerhouse like All Might. It's what Kaminari was getting at earlier when he said that although Deku is the strongest hero in the world, it still looks like he could use some help. Even at the absolute pinnacle of his strength, Deku has always torn himself apart both physically and mentally for the sake of saving others. He's Superman with the underdog factor of Spider-Man. The villain now knew that as long as Deku was still able to move, the rest of them would never give up. But before he could extinguish their hope, he was shocked by something. Elsewhere, an American man mentioned how their jets were not supposed to have ejection seats. Star's brothers in arms presumed that All Might was responsible for their lives being saved, because of course, All for One shot their aircrafts down. Teetering on the verge of consciousness, All Might told them that the kids were striving for a perfect victory, which is the Bakugo approach, so the fewer deaths, the better. The man thought that All Might was one to talk, considering his current state. All Might then lifted a hand into the air. He thought about the first time he saw Deku be a hero and rushed to Bakugo's aid against the sludge villain, something that actually spurred him on and helped his body move. Ever since then, All Might has seen the young man in a certain light. Melissa Shield, Rhodey Soul, and his siblings all wish for the heroes to do their best. While pushing Deku forward, Ida wondered if his friend remembered their first day at school at the gates of UA. Back then, Uraraka said that she actually likes the name Deku, since it pretty much screams, do your best. For Deku, just making friends at all was more than he could have ever asked for, and now he has them in abundance. Ida finally understood what she meant by those words. Meanwhile, Uraraka was with Pixie Bob inside a helicopter. Watching the broadcast on her phone, the feline hero urged her to hold on for just a little while longer since they were nearly at the hospital. Barely conscious, Uraraka thought about Deku. She too remembered the sentiment behind his name and wished for him to do his best. In America, the president slammed a fist on his desk. The commander-in-chief insisted that they send all their heroes to Japan immediately. His aide feared what would happen to their country if All for One wins, which is why they and the other countries had refused to move for all this time. But the president didn't care. They needed to do it right now. This guy has been watching all along and is finally making his move. The world stands with Deku against All for One. An exasperated Shoto looked on. Meanwhile, Deku could hear everyone's voices call out to him. Tsukauchi, the shirtless fan, Tiger, Endeavor's biggest fan and the people around him, Koda, the newscaster Daikaku Miyagi who cut off one of his horns for the sake of his job, the hero expert Aorio Kuraishisu, the American twins, Gran Torino, Eri, Taneo Tokuda, and the others from Juzo News, some guy who might low-key be Deku's dad, and the last woman All Might saved during the Kamino incident who polished his statue day after day. They all called out for Deku and the others to do their best. All Might raised a fist in honor of Deku as he soared to heights beyond them all in true plus ultra fashion. Since that initial moment of heroism, Deku has been the greatest hero to the greatest hero, All Might. Inko shuddered as she saw her beloved son charge forward, but he made a promise to her, and she believes in her son. With oversized tears, she screamed at the screen, telling her baby boy to do his best. And with that, Deku's fist was finally delivered to the villain. This has been My Hero Academia Chapter 422, Izuku Midoriya Rising. Oh my goodness, the emotions in this one. I will miss this series tremendously. Deku is one hell of a guy, and Horikoshi is one hell of a mangaka. Will the real My Hero fans please stand up? Because I need each and every one of you to do your best. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.